corporate governance remains a crucial element for the survival of companies and nations in recessed economies. The success of the 8-point agenda of the present administration that aims at getting the country out of the economic woods, as well as cushioning the effect of the removal of petrol subsidy, a robust corporate structure is essential to enhance resource utilization in the private and public sectors. And to discuss more on the role of corporate governance in improving the nation's depressed economy and contribute to the realization of this agenda of the President and his administration, we have in the studio Alhaji Garba Abubakar, an administrator and also a financial expert. Alhaji Garba is the Registrar General of the Corporate Affairs Commission. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, indeed. So let's ask, first of all, what can be done to ensure that corporate governance, as a structure that it is, to guide businesses and professionals here in Nigeria, helps to tackle issues, of corruption and accountability? Because most people will say, that's the challenge that most companies contend with or have to contend with in the Nigerian business space.
Thank you for having me, but let me correct this. Okay. I'm not a financial expert. I'm a lawyer.
Oh, okay.
And yes,
we stand corrected then.
So, as you may know, Nigeria has a corporate governance code that was issued in 2018. It's a principle-based governance code, comply and explain, and it was modeled after the South African Corporate Governance Code. The whole essence of corporate governance is to ensure that companies are properly managed and to hold the management accountable in order to deliver value to the shareholders, to the creditors, as well as the public and the community in which these companies operate. It is about having structures and ensuring accountability and good governance practices by some of these companies. The requirements of the code provides that all public companies and all companies that are public interest entities. By public interest entities, these are companies that render returns to other regulators other than the CAC and the FRS. These are companies that are within the regulatory purview of the Central Bank of Nigeria, regulatory purview of the National Insurance Commission, regulatory purview of Pension Commission, and other regulators. These companies are required to imbibe the principles of this code in their governance practices as a company, and they must render annual returns to the Financial Reporting Council. The Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria is charged with the responsibility of issuing these codes and ensuring compliance with the code. So these companies, by law, are required to render every year. They are supposed to submit their audited financial statements to the Financial Reporting Council. Together with this statement, they must attach evidence of compliance with the principle of this code. Usually, it covers issues like nominations and the structure of the board, how the board is to be composed of. And you have the issues of independent directors, independent non-executive directors, independent executive directors, and issues like this. It deals with issues about financial statements, about the composition of the audit committee, about the tenure of the board, and the categorization of the offices of the companies. The code provides that you cannot combine the same office on the chief executive as well as the chairman. So these are principles that are globally tested, that ensures accountability and provides for good governance practices in order to deliver value, not just to the shareholders, but also to the community, as well as the general public and the creditors. Because when companies are properly managed, they deliver value, and not just to the shareholders that get dividends at the end of the day. Even the community in which these companies operate, they benefit a lot in the areas of corporate social responsibility.
Indeed, I was going to ask that as my next question, because we've spoken a lot about organizational structure. So does this new corporate governance code, also protect the interest of, say, other shareholders, customers, as well as other employers?
Yes, that's the whole essence of the corporate governance principles. Because when a company is being formed, what they usually provide is their constitution. That's the Articles of Association that enshrined the structure of the company, the composition of the board, the nature of the meetings to be held and how these meetings are to be held, issues of quorum and other things. They are not detailed enough to ensure accountability in the sense that what are the directors supposed to do? Because the court usually comes with code of ethics.
Okay.
It's accompanied by code of ethics that normally guides the directors on how to conduct themselves. Issues of conflict of interest. If you're a director in a company, are you allowed to transact with that company? Or are you supposed to make disclosure when such decisions have been taken by the board? So these are matters, it's all encompassing. The code is all encompassing. So to the extent that a company falls within the category of companies that by law or by the Financial Reporting Act is supposed to render these returns, when they are rendering the returns, they must show what they have complied with and what they have not complied with. If they are unable to comply with any requirement, they must explain. And there are sanctions for if they don't make such disclosure. So as I've said, globally, these principles have been tested and they have actually created value for these companies. Companies that have good governance practices, they create more value, they make more returns to the community, to the shareholders. They make more money actually, because if the affairs of the companies are properly conducted, the tendency of corruption, of insider dealings is minimized. So at the end of the day, you have a situation where values are created for the benefit of the shareholders, for the benefit of the community, and for the benefit of the general public.
All right.
Alhaji, you know, as one of the head of a corporate, you know, organization, and we've seen how the new administration, you know, have promised renewed hope, and yet the economy is in a, I wouldn't say a bad state, but then we all know where it is. You know, it's in a spot where people are a bit confused, everything is strained and all that. So as a financial, you know, corporate organization head, what do you think, you know, the corporate bodies need to do in order to assist the administration, because it's all eyes on governance right now, you know, in Nigeria? So what do you think your own quota would be, you know, your own contribution to the
Yes,
economy?
globally, the private sector is the main driver of the economy globally. In other climes, you have more jobs in the private sector than you have in government. The responsibility of government is to provide the enabling environment for the private sector to thrive. And most of these things that we're facing, they are temporal. The president has said it, that we have to bear these pains for a brighter future, for a more prosperous future. Certain decisions have to be made, not because the government wants to punish the people, but these are necessary measures in order to address these issues. Look at the issue of subsidy. Government has explained this. Almost all the revenue that the government was earning was going into subsidy payment. Now that this has ended, there will be surplus in the long run to take care of other basic needs. But for companies, they are the main drivers of the economy, and the responsibility of government is to provide the enabling environment. If you look at the 8-point agenda of government, most of what the issues there are private sector driven. You have issues of access to capital, you have issue of security, you have issues of job creation. Most of these jobs will be provided by the private sector. You have issues of economic growth. So when you have this kind of measures in place, what is left is for the investors. This will create the enabling environment for people to invest in the economy. Once you fight insecurity, you don't need to call people to come and invest. They'll come on their own. When you have access to capital, even small entrepreneurs will be able to go and get this capital and invest. In our own economy, majority of the companies that operate are small companies. But one of the major concerns has been lack of capital. And when you fight corruption, there won't be leakages. So there will be enough money, both for the private sector and for the government to provide the necessary infrastructure for the people and for the companies to operate. Then you have issues like rule of law. What is rule of law? Rule of law means everybody will operate in accordance with the law. And when you have a matter in court, you get justice, regardless of who you are, regardless of how poor you are. So these are initiatives that are welcomed, and these are initiatives that will propel the economy to prosperity, to development, and I can tell you, within the next 2 years, we'll begin to be able to see the fruit of some of these initiatives.
Mr. Garba, so in every country, or in most countries of the world, I'm talking about capitalist economies now, a large percentage of what drives their economy is the small and medium enterprises. In Nigeria, unfortunately, the small and medium enterprises are gradually disappearing, unfortunately, due to lack of capital and other factors, that has affected them. You spoke earlier about insider trading, and the first thing that came to my mind was dollar arbitrage, when there was a parallel market price and then there was an official CBN price. What can be done, and how can such corporate governance code such as this protect people such as the small and medium enterprises to ensure that they are not wiped out of business completely? Because you will agree with me that the business environment here in Nigeria has not particularly been friendly to them.
Well, your position may not be altogether correct.
Okay.
Because in the past there had been interventions to actually promote small businesses. Even as we speak, the Small and Medium Enterprise Development Agency has what they call conditional grant scheme. They incubate, they provide some funding, they register the business on behalf of the small entrepreneurs. They provide initial seed fund to them to go and operate. They give them training on bookkeeping, on even how to carry on the business. That has been there. And there are other interventions under the past government. But I can tell you the 8-point agenda is all encompassing.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, and it will address these issues. So go on.
Okay, good, because if I really wanted to come in real quick. So for some of these interventions, how effective can they be when, for example, some of these SMEs are dollar reliant? For example, they have to deal in Forex, and then you collected a grant at a particular amount with the Naira against the dollar, and then you have to come to the market and realize that the dollar has probably increased and you cannot purchase goods at a particular price that you ought to have been able to purchase before. So this brings me back to the challenge that I mentioned.
But in truth, most of the small entrepreneurs, they don't need dollars. If you are talking about small entrepreneurs, except those that import wares,
of course,
and shoes, why can't we produce this in Nigeria? Why can't we?
It's capital intensive.
Why can't we strengthen our local industries? No, it's not. Go to Aba and see what they are producing.
So tell us how we can.
No. What I'm saying is, most of those small entrepreneurs are not really dollar related.
They're dollar
reliant, except those that go to Dubai to bring shoes, to bring wares, and sell. And those ones are they really adding value to the economy. We are talking about the small woman, a small entrepreneur that operates by the roadside, that sells groundnut, that roasts groundnut and sell. The one that makes plantain chips, does she require dollars? Even the mechanics that operate in our neighborhood, do they require dollars?
Of course, they do not require dollars.
These are mainly the small and medium enterprises.
The smallest,
yes, the micro and small.
Exactly.
So those ones, they are not reliant on dollars.
So these are the people.
And secondly, we have to look at our economy and look at what we can do and what we can produce locally. In a situation where people are importing toothpick into Nigeria, people are importing cashew nuts into Nigeria when we have cashew all over the place. Why can't they set up the industry to produce cashew?
This brings me to my next question. What are the challenges of implementing corporate governance in Nigeria?
As I have told you, the application of corporate governance code presently is limited to public companies and public interest entities. But nothing stops small and medium enterprises from imbibing the spirit and the principles of this code to ensure value for their own companies. So there is no hindrance. The principle of the code is apply and explain. It's not mandatory as such, but aside the code that is issued by the Financial Reporting Council, the various sector regulators have also issued their own code. The CBN has its own code of corporate governance, which is mandatory. The Pension Commission, National Pension Commission, has its own corporate governance code, which is mandatory. The National Insurance Commission has also issued its own code, which is mandatory. So for all the regulated companies, you don't have a choice than to implement. For companies that are public companies that are quoted on the stock exchange, they are also required to implement these codes, and they must render returns to the Nigerian exchange on the application of these codes. So to the extent that these principles are applied and explained, and people have seen value in the implementation of this code, I don't see any issue with the application of the code in Nigeria.
So are there punitive measures to be taken against, for example, public entities who fail to implement?
Yeah, there are penalties.
Please talk to us.
No, there are penalties. If you check the regulations of the Financial Reporting Council, penalties have been specified for non-compliance. And the various sector regulators, CBN is very strict on the application of the code. In fact, you cannot appoint a director in any bank in Nigeria without prior clearance from CBN. You cannot appoint a director in a pension company without the approval of PENCOM. You cannot appoint a director in an insurance company without prior clearance from the National Insurance Commission. So these are safeguards that have been put in place. These are the key sectors of the economy. And I can assure you there are adequate safeguards to ensure that companies that operate in these sectors are properly managed and they render value to the shareholders, to the directors.
Speaking of companies, you know, and businesses in Nigeria, Mr. Garba, we've seen the CAC lately, you know, creating more, should I say, more efforts, you know, in order to refund the country of the embezzled funds, you know, from money laundering and all that. So walk us through the recent one of the open business register, I think that's what it is, where there would be an open place for people to, everybody, for the public to have an insight of what businesses are there.
Okay, you are referring to the Beneficial Ownership Register that was launched on the 25th of May this year. This was a register, is the first in Africa that was developed in line with beneficial ownership data standard, and is part of the anti-corruption initiative of the government. And you can see from the 8-point agenda, fighting corruption is also key. Nigeria has subscribed to membership of the Open Government Partnership and the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative. We are also, presently we are in the grey list of the Financial Action Task Force because of some of the weaknesses observed in our anti-corruption and anti-money laundering measures. So all these initiatives are part of measures to exit the grey list. We've been given 2 years to exit the grey list. One of the requirements, one of the observations from the evaluation that was carried out by the Intergovernmental Action Group Against Money Laundering in West Africa is we didn't have a standalone beneficial ownership register that's designed in line with the PATA principles. So we had to quickly close this gap, and the Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020 for the first time provided for disclosure of persons with significant control, which is the same as the beneficial owners. So between when the law was passed and the launching of the register, it took some time. Before the register, the standalone register was built, we were collecting this information and publishing it on our website. But since 25th of May, we have a standalone register, bor.cac.gov.ng, that gives you information about the beneficial owners of every company in Nigeria. And unlike what was obtainable under the KAMA, we had issued beneficial ownership regulations or person with significant control regulations that further defines who a beneficial owner is. So the definition is now narrowed to a natural person. A corporate body cannot be a beneficial owner because it's talking about the ultimate beneficiary of the company. The regulation has also, for the first time, introduced what we call PEPs, politically exposed person. If you are affiliated, or if you are a politically exposed person or affiliated to a politically exposed person, while making this disclosure, you have to state that. Then the disclosure in relation to state-owned enterprises. State-owned enterprises are companies that are owned by government. These companies, they may not have, everybody is a beneficial owner. Every citizen of that country is a beneficial owner. So it's not possible to put the name of every citizen in the register. So in such circumstance, you put the name of the chief executive officer of the shareholding company as a beneficial owner. So the register was launched, as I said, on 25th of May, and it has provided information to the general public, to investigation agencies, to know who owns what in a Nigerian company, those that ultimately control these companies. And as I've said, these are measures to satisfy the requirements of open government partnership, to satisfy the requirements of the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative and to satisfy the requirement of the Financial Action Task Force. So we're hoping that with all these measures in place, we'll be able to exit the grey list in less than 2 years. Though it's not just about beneficial ownership. There are other things that are supposed to be done by our law enforcement agencies and the investigation agencies. So it's a collective effort. They are all doing their own so that collectively we'll have enough reasons to request PATA for a review and to exit the grey list.
And there was a mention, I think, sorry, there was a mention, you know, on a release of a statement I saw about, you know, if businesses that do not have, they haven't done, you know, their auditing for a particular year and all that, they'll be wiped off from the register. Okay, and people are panicking on that.
No, that's striking up. You see, we need to understand one thing. Owning a company or a business is not a joke. If you are not ready to transact, don't register it. There are obligations attached to registration.
But there are some small and business owners that would prefer to register a business first, before ahead. You know, and it takes a year or two to get their
that is a mistake. In other countries, you can register and wait. When you are ready to commence business, the registry will issue a certificate of commencement of business. In Nigeria, you are not supposed to register unless you are ready to start. Because the obligation to submit returns to the CAC starts from day one. So for a business name, you are supposed to file returns every year. For a company, you have a window of 18 months after registration. And subsequently, every year you must file. And these are obligations beyond the returns. When you make any change on the composition of the directors, or the shareholders, or the partners, you are also required to submit this information to the CAC and update your records. Or when you change your address. So what we have done, and these are part of the effectiveness of our measures on money laundering. You cannot operate, you cannot have a company and you fail to file returns for 10 years and expect us to leave you on the register. You are not supposed to. The law has now given a minimum period of 10 years within which if a company does not file returns, that company is deemed to be inactive or dormant, and the commission can strike it off. But striking off the name does not bring the company to an end. The owners of this company or the directors or even a creditor to this company can apply to court to get the name reinstated. But one thing the people have not understood is the implication of getting the name struck off is whatever asset you have in the name of that company will be vested in the government vona vacantia, because it's like a lost property.
Now that's where the
well, so let them come and update their records. There are obligations. Go and check. We didn't put the name of any company that was registered in the last 5 years, or in the last 8 years, or even 9 years. And these are companies that have not filed at all in the last 10 years. So what can you explain to the world that you have 2 million companies in your records, but only a quarter of them
are active,
are doing what they're supposed to do? Why do you leave these companies in the register? Why? For what purpose? We'll remove them when they are ready. Then they can go to court and get it reinstated. At least the world will take us serious. Because I cannot explain why out of 2 million, only maybe 400,000 to 500,000 are complying. So it means what? That we're not doing our work.
All right.
We've been sensitizing people, we've been telling them the benefits. And as of today, banks will not even allow you to operate your account if your asset is inactive.
Okay. So why South Africa?
What do you mean by South Africa?
Okay, so you sampled the...
Yes, we are late starters on corporate governance code. Our first code was issued in 2003. And that was a voluntary code. But the principles of Code of Corporate Governance has changed over the years. So South Africa is also learning from us. Our beneficial ownership register, they came here to understudy what we did. So you can go anywhere in the world and learn the best practice. The King's Court in South Africa is a model that other countries are actually following. So going to South Africa does not mean that we are adopting what South Africa did, hook, line, and sinker. But you do environmental scanning, find out what other countries have done, and learn from the best. So it's not only the South African code that was... Incidentally, I was in the national committee that developed those codes, that developed the code. And the Financial Reporting Council is presently working on even a code for public organizations, for public institutions. So it's not going to end with the private sector. They are developing a code for the not-for-profit organizations as well as for government organizations as well.
All right, then what about mechanisms to ensure that the code is strengthened?
Yeah, the process of review is continuous. Because after some years, you have to look at it. What has changed? What are the new principles that should be entrenched in the code? So it's a continuous thing. Corporate governance keeps evolving. And even management and administration of companies keep changing. So you may have reasons to change one or two things. And as I've said, the code is not a one-fit-all. The sector regulators have also issued their code. But the principle of the FRC code says that they can only issue principles that are stiffer than what is in the FRC code. They can't issue anything that is lower than what is enshrined in the FRC code. So if a sector regulator is saying that if the FRC code says you must have minimum of 5 directors, PENCOM code cannot say you should have 4 directors. Because the FRC code is a national code that has general application to all entities in Nigeria.
So when there is a violation and, for example, an average citizen notices this violation, is there a mechanism where he can report or bring this to the fore?
On corporate governance?
Yes.
No, generally there is whistleblowing. Every agency has its own. Yeah,
exactly.
Every agency.
So I was going to ask whether there's a mechanism.
I may not be able to speak for FRC, but I can assure you, if you have any reasons to complain on any issue relating to corporate governance, you can write to FRC, or you can go to their website. I am sure there's a complaint email that you can escalate these issues to. For in our own case, on beneficial ownership, we have a discrepancy reporting tool on the register. So if you observed any discrepancy in any information, or if you have reason to believe that the names disclosed in the register are not the true beneficial owners of these companies, you can report to us.
Okay. So, Mr. Registrar General, 2 million companies is a large number, and having barely around 500,000, I don't know if that's the correct figure.
I'm giving you a hypothetical figure.
Okay, because I needed to be sure. Yeah. So is just striking out the names of these companies who have not been active, enough measure to ensure that they pick up?
This is a collective effort. CAC cannot do it alone.
Indeed.
So we are collaborating with other regulators. We are building synergy with the CBN, with NICOM, with even the banks. You may have so many corporate accounts. One thing with Nigerians is some don't want to keep money in their own personal name. They put it under a corporate account. There is an indication that that company is active. But the owner of that business, don't be surprised, he won't pay his tax. He'll not even come to CAC to file returns. I
would like you to expand more on the psyche of Nigerian business owners and what to change.
So you see, we are building synergy with the FIRS. We have system integration with the FIRS that allows them to see all the companies that are registered with us. They see the status of these companies. And we have also built an electronic financial statement portal that allows companies to submit their audited financial statements in extensible reporting language. They don't need to scan and upload. So I can easily query the database today and tell you, these are the number of companies that have filed, this is their average turnover, this is what they have spent on as personnel cost. Yes, the system will tell you. So that system is also integrated with the Federal Revenue Service, so that when any company submits its financial statements for tax assessment, FIRS will be able to open their database, because we are the only registry of companies in Nigeria. And we are the only organization that the law allows to maintain this information and make this information available to the public. You can't go to FIRS and request for financial statement of any company that has paid tax. But with CAC, you can request for financial statement of any company in Nigeria for a fee. We'll issue it to you. So if you have reason to suspect that a company is making under declaration of its turnover or of its profit or of its net assets, then you can report. So it's a collective effort. And under the auspices of the Financial Services Regulation Committee, which is a committee that is chaired by the CBN, and we are introducing a lot of initiatives to address some of these issues, because CBN requires CAC for information. NICOM requires information from CAC. FIRS requires information from CAC. Even EFCC on a daily basis, we provide information to all these entities. For some of them, they have systems. We have system-to-system integration. So it's a collective thing. But we have to change the psyche of the average businessman for him to understand that if you want to operate a business in your own name without registration, the law allows you to do that, provided it is not a regulated business. The law says you are only obliged to register a business if you are using a name other than your forename or surname or your initials without any addition. You can go and operate, you can trade, you can have your shop, put your name as Mutiu Adepoju on the shop, don't add anything. Then nobody will come to you. But you have to pay your tax as an individual. But if you choose to register a company or a business name, there are obligations attached to this registration. And you must file the return. So as I've said, we are actually collaborating with all stakeholders to ensure that only business entities that have active status should be allowed to operate to access services. So if you go to our portal now, the portal tells you whether a company is active, whether it's inactive, whether it is in liquidation or a receivership or under administration. And so before dealing with a company, I expect any diligent person to check the CAC register. And the register is free. If you go to search.cac.gov.ng, it gives you information about every company registered in Nigeria, the date of the registration number, and the address of the company.
So this would help to curb, fraud and scam.
And it tells you also whether the status is active or not. If you want to know who are the directors, that's a paid service. There is a place there where you pay for, you can view, you pay.
But it's possible.
Yeah, it's possible. You can even get a report, a certified extract about everything about that company. Once you pay the requisite fees, you can get this information. So with this, anybody that wants to deal with any company, at a glance, you will know whether that company is a serious company. And these are part of measures of enforcing compliance. Because most of those that are registered, some have used addresses that are no longer traceable, and they have not come to change their address. And at the time some of these companies were registered, there was no email. For the recent ones, companies registered from 2014 to date, we have their email addresses. So we send emails to them, reminding them of their obligations to file returns or when there are anomalies in their filing. But for the older companies, it's difficult to read them. So for such companies, we expect that they should come on their own to update. But if they have any bank account that they are operating with an inactive status, we'll ensure that they cannot operate, they can access this fund until they update.
Yes. We're talking about role of governance in Nigeria, and it's not about, at the end of the day, it's not about how much the country gets, it's also about how are the people in this country faring.
Yeah, it's part of the governance.
Yes, so, you said that there is a bit of collaboration with the other corporate bodies, agencies. So, you know that Nigerian MSME are always complaining about multiple taxes, and then at the same time, at the end of the year, you bring your audits, of how much you've earned. So, it's like it's straining the rules and all that, and the taxes are just, choking a small business owner, and we all know that the government cannot provide employment for everyone. So these people are already creating ways for themselves, and then the government is not really favoring them. So what is your role, as corporate agencies working together in order to at least make these things easy for these people? Because we've seen restaurant owners having multiple complaints of today someone will come and collect tax, the night after a week another person comes, and then the end of the year you're still expected to pay more.
No, let me explain this. I think there is a national committee on fiscal governance and taxation reforms that is working. But our work is not about taxation. It's all part of the governance. When you operate a business, you are required, when you make changes to that business, to update your record. At the end of the year, you submit your financial statements. Not for the purpose, for us, it's not for the purpose of assessing tax. What you pay as filing fee for your annual returns is not related to your turnover. It's not. So we need this information for the government to use. For planning, Yes, for research, because government needs to know how many companies are operating in the economy. How many? What is the turnover of these companies? How much are they spending on personnel costs? How much are they spending on diesel? Yes.
All right.
So this will help government to plan.
Unfortunately.
So it's not just about how much are they paying annually.
Yes.
If a company is filing its return as when due, how much are they paying?
I wish this conversation could continue further, but unfortunately that's the most we can take on the program as at this time. Talking about the discussion segment, Mr. Alhaji Garba Abubakar, the Registrar General of the Corporate Affairs Commission. Thank you so much for gracing our invitation and speaking to us.
Thank you for having me.
You know, the Registrar General has been speaking to us about corporate governance and its implementation here in Nigeria. We do hope you learned one or two about its implementation, and also we hope that he will join us subsequently when we invite him to talk more, hopefully, about proper implementation, you know, of the policy here in Nigeria.